Chapter 1106. The silence seemed to last for a moment, but it also seemed to last for thousands of years. Li Tianlan stood silently, like a statue. The ruthless energy shrouded the windbreaker and penetrated into the surface of his body through the windbreaker. Everything seemed to freeze. Only time was hurriedly rushing by. It was like a vast torrent, surging. He stood in the almost eternal waves of time. In an instant, he seemed to have been completely weathered by the power of time, and there was nothing around him. The prosperity of Yuzhou, the dazzling sunshine, the beautiful women, the monstrous power, the absolute force, the lofty world, the sun, the moon, and the stars, everything seemed to be completely broken in an instant. There was nothing in the world. No, the world itself no longer existed. Everything around him became the purest nothingness. Because it was nothingness, it could not be described at all. Because it did not exist, everything he felt became an illusion. Everything in the world lost its meaning. Only that faintly discernible energy was still fusing with him. That energy was like an extremely weak but ancient willpower. It seemed to be trying to tell him something, but the transmission was so vague and weak that Li Tianlan couldn't grasp it at all. One after another, extremely vague pictures flashed in the deepest part of his consciousness. In a trance, Li Tianlan seemed to see a lot of things, but at the same time, he seemed to see nothing. He imprinted all the vague images in his mind. They seemed to be meaningless, but they were more meaningful than anything else. Nothingness was revolving around him. There was only nothingness in the illusion. Only his thoughts were the only reality. His thoughts paused for a second. Under the sun, Li Tianlan suddenly straightened up and took a long breath. The fusion of that energy and ruthlessness had been completed. The gorgeous black windbreaker returned to silence and was draped over Li Tianlan's body without any abnormality. Li Tianlan looked at everything around him. There were tall and straight pines and cypresses on both sides. The clean and tidy road extended all the way to the villas not far away. Flowers were in full bloom on both sides of the road. Yuzhou was sunny after the snow. The world was vast and prosperous as before. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slightly. His face was pale, and his breathing began to quicken. Almost in the blink of an eye, he was completely soaked in cold sweat. Li Tianlan squatted down in pain and reached out to cover his heart. An indescribable fear struck his soul the moment he saw the world around him. He did not know where this fear came from. But in an instant, the fear that spread to the highest point instantly broke down his iron-like willpower. His rapid breathing was followed by an incomparably strong sense of suffocation. His heart was beating wildly. The first heart and the second heart beat at the same time. The huge force shattered the ground under his feet, completely pressing Qin Weibai against the car next to him. He slowly knelt on the ground, covered his chest, and opened his mouth wide. His eyes were unfocused. In his consciousness, a huge sense of impending death surged, as if he would die completely in the next second. Then, the fear was gone. Without warning, without the slightest delay, it suddenly disappeared. Li Tianlan knelt on one knee in a daze. He looked at the sky around him and was silent for a long time. Cold sweat dripped from his face and landed on the ground. He kept taking deep breaths, and his complexion gradually returned to normal. A pair of small hands appeared beside him and hugged his arm tightly. Li Tianlan turned his head slightly. In his sight, Qin Weibai's face was as pale as snow, and her eyes, which used to be cold and bright, even looked a little empty. "It's okay." Li Tianlan forced a smile. "It's okay." What the hell happened? Qin Weibai's voice was extremely persistent. "Tell me." Li Tian was silent for a full half a minute before shaking his head. "I can't tell." He probably knew why. But he couldn't tell. At that moment, he did feel unprecedented fear. This fear could be said to be brought to him by the ruthless energy. But it could also be said to be his own. He couldn't describe that feeling at all. In that moment of trance, he saw a lot of blurred pictures. Those pictures were blurred, and he didn't know what he saw. But Li Tianlan was sure that his fear had absolutely something to do with those pictures. The roar of the engine sounded from afar. In his perception, countless eyes were watching this direction, including the security personnel of the Bai family manor and cameras installed in every corner. Li Tianlan's abnormality had spread throughout the Bai family at the fastest speed. Dongxing Wudi, Bai Zhanfang, Bai Qingzhao, Bai Qingqian, and others all rushed over. Li Tianlan stood up slowly. His movements were slow and even cautious, as if he was avoiding something. Qin Weibai could feel that Li Tianlan was not avoiding her. His movements looked more like he was avoiding the air around him. Tianlan, Qin Weibai wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. I'm fine. Li Tianlan shook his head. I just feel a little uncomfortable. The fear had disappeared. His mind had returned to reason. However, in his incomparably calm thoughts, he felt the oppression of the entire world. Everything seemed to be pressing down on him, as if it wanted to crush him to death here. That sense of oppression was gradually fading. Li Tianlan's face also began to quickly return to normal. Get in the car. Li Tianlan gently hugged Qin Weibai. Holding the exquisite and delicate body in his arms, his heart seemed to have completely calmed down. Li Tianlan lowered his head slightly, bit Qin Weibai's pink ear, and chuckled. Minister, they are all scared. I see Auntie's face is pale. You have to help me explain later. Qin Weibai was stunned and took a deep look at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan didn't realize his problem for a moment. The car was still coming from the depths of the Bai family's manor. It was at least hundreds of meters away from here. Qin Weibai could see the approaching car. The question was, how could Li Tianlan see the person in the car? Li Tianlan's auntie could only be Bai Qingqian. In this case, Bai Qingqian couldn't drive in person. Seeing Bai Qingqian's face directly, how was that possible? Qin Weibai hesitated and didn't ask. She obediently turned around and got in the car. The car drove along the road to the villas inside the manor. The cold wind was blowing the woods in the sun. As the car went away, Lin Shi's figure appeared in the place where Li Tianlan had knelt on the ground. He looked at a small piece of the road that had been shattered, looking serious and thoughtful. Li Tianlan doesn't look good. Wang Xingxiao said slowly. Really? Lin Shi stared at the cracked ground under his feet. What do you think? Obviously, he seems to be frightened by something. But we all know very well that there was nothing around him just now. From this point of view, Li Tianlan's mental state may have some problems. In layman's terms, maybe he has been possessed by the devil. Wang Xingxiao said lightly. I agree with your first sentence. Lin Shi nodded. Obviously, His Majesty Li Tianlan was indeed frightened by something. But I don't agree with your second inference. Maybe you don't know that His Majesty Li Tianlan is a god. There is no so-called qi deviation, and it is impossible for him to be contaminated and assimilated. He was indeed frightened by something. But there was nothing around him. Was he frightened by Qin Weibai? Wang Xingxiao questioned bluntly. When he said that he was frightened by Qin Weibai, he couldn't help laughing. If this was true, he really couldn't imagine how deformed Li Tianlan's aesthetic concept would be. Of course, it was not Her Highness Qin Weibai. Lin Shi said flatly, I don't agree with you that there was nothing around him. On the contrary, I think at that moment, there was something around him that we couldn't see. Deliberately mystifying. Wang Xingxiao sneered disdainfully. His tolerance for Lin Shi's various behaviors seemed to have reached the limit. There was obviously nothing. Maybe there was nothing. But what if the perspective was different? Lin Shi suddenly said. His arms suddenly glowed faintly. Messages from the apostles came one after another. A virtual screen formed in front of Lin Shi. The information that flowed on the screen wasn't some data, nor was it some information. Instead, it was faces. There were white people, black people, and yellow people. Old people, children, women, men, of all ages, of all races, all faces. The only thing they had in common was that these faces were all extremely panicked and frightened. Did you notice? Lin Shi looked at these faces and suddenly said. The last picture of the apostles was also sent. It was Li Tianlan's extremely frightened expression at that moment. Li Tianlan's expression was lined up with the faces around him. Wang Xingxiao suddenly felt a little strange, but he didn't know what was strange about it. He observed carefully, and the more he looked, the more he felt that these people's expressions were highly similar. These people's expressions are similar? Wang Xingxiao frowned and replied. According to the analysis of the apostles, these expressions are as high as 96% similar. But at that moment, His Majesty Li Tianlan's expression was more distorted, which shows that he suffered more fear. What else did you notice? Lin Shi asked. What? Wang Xingxiao was a little confused. Environment. Lin Shi took a deep breath and said, didn't you notice that these people, except for His Majesty Li Tianlan, are all in very narrow and enclosed spaces like elevators and secret rooms? His Majesty Li Tianlan is the only exception. Wang Xingxiao stopped breathing. In an instant, he realized what was so strange about this photo wall. Indeed, everyone was in an environment similar to a secret room. But in this photo of Li Tianlan, he was surrounded by sunlight, woods, and a vast open environment. What on earth do you want to say? Wang Xingxiao looked at Lin Shi and asked seriously. These people are all patients, and they have the same disease. Lin Shi said expressionlessly, and His Majesty Li Tianlan's expression analysis and the heartbeat frequency at that moment are highly similar to these people. We are very sure that His Majesty Li Tianlan also has the same disease as them. What disease? Wang Xingxiao didn't know why he felt a little uneasy. Claustrophobia. Lin Shi said indifferently. Claustrophobia, claustrophobia. Wang Xingxiao looked at the sky around him. He looked at the vast world and the jungle around him. Just now, Li Tianlan stood in this extremely open environment, and then he suddenly got claustrophobia? Wang Xingxiao looked at Lin Shi seriously and said, are you kidding me? Chapter 1107. Wang Xingxiao's voice was not very loud, but it was full of extreme absurdity and mockery. Let's not talk about whether Li Tianlan had the so-called claustrophobia before. There was no telling what the probability of him suddenly suffering from claustrophobia was. Right in front of him, right in the Bai family's manor, there was nothing that could make him claustrophobic. This manor of Bai clan was close to a mountain and a river. It covered about 6,000 square meters. It was magnificent. Having such a manor being close to a scenic spot in Yuzhou province represented more than identity and social status. For many years, Bai Zhanfang had served as the speaker of Yuzhou. He and Wu Jingmin, the current deputy prime minister of the cabinet, could be said to be the two oldest members of parliament in Zhongzhou state. In terms of seniority, Bai Zhanfang had the most seniority among all the members of parliament. People from all walks of Yuzhou who were dissatisfied with the Bai family had privately mentioned the topic of the Bai family occupying a mountain to be the king, but Bai Zhanfang had always been unmoved. Now, with the appearance of Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace, the strong rise of the giant group had been extremely obvious. However, it was said that the manor was going to expand. This was no longer important. Even if it didn't expand now, it was still a manor of nearly 2,000 acres, which was close to the size of 2 forbidden palaces. The buildings here were sparse and arranged in picturesque disorder. The view could be said to be extremely wide. Claustrophobia? The current situation was almost equivalent to Li Tianlan standing on a boundless prairie, but suddenly felt that the vast prairie was like a large suitcase, and he was out of breath in the suitcase. How absurd was that? But Lin Shi said it very seriously. Wang Xingxiao's face was cold. His dissatisfaction with Lin Shi was almost undisguised. The cooperation between the two sides hadn't officially begun yet, but the Wang family of Beihai had already paid the price of the divine martial corps of the non-continent. Although the change of ownership of hundreds of thousands of troops didn't seem to have much impact in a short time, the actual impact could not be ignored. What did Lin Shi do? He said he would deal with Li Tianlan. But Wang Xingxiao did not feel a trace of hostility from him to Li Tianlan. On the contrary, what made him absent-minded was that he felt that Lin Shi's respect for Li Tianlan had always been full. There was no definite action to deal with Li Tianlan. He also didn't take any action to treat his father. The other party used an extremely magical ability to take him around the world, study the energy of murderous weapons, and secretly observe Li Tianlan's every move. Now, he was even in a daze at the footprints he left, saying that he had claustrophobia. Wang Xingxiao felt that the other party was talking nonsense, and he was always talking about inexplicable topics. Hostility? Wang Xingxiao did not feel it at all. Lin Shi's respect for Li Tianlan was obvious. The man and the woman, the apostle and the saint, talked about Li Tianlan like fanatics talking about their god, with fanatical faces. Gritting his teeth, Wang Xingxiao watched Lin Shi ponder over Li Tianlan's footprints and the cracked floor. An idea suddenly came to his mind. If saint and apostle were here, would they kneel down and kiss the footprints left by Li Tianlan? The thought was not funny at all. Wang Xingxiao felt a burst of irritation at the thought. The only thing he could comfort himself now was that the plan for treating his father that Saint came up with now was thought to be miraculous by the elites of the Wang family of Beihai's biological laboratory after a simple combination. But it was just a plan, like a candy to comfort him. As for when it would be sent to him, all he could do was wait. I never make any jokes. While Wang Xingxiao was thinking, Lin Shi's cold voice rang out. So? Wang Xingxiao sneered and said, do you really think that Li Tianlan is likely to have claustrophobia in this environment? You saw the fact, didn't you? Lin Shi asked in reply. What I saw was that Li Tianlan was not in a good state, not some damn claustrophobia. His Majesty just said that he was a little uncomfortable. Lin Shi's voice was calm. Wang Xingxiao took a deep breath and slightly narrowed his eyes. If you still want to talk about these topics, then maybe we don't need to talk anymore. I'm very busy, and I don't have time to waste with you. In fact, I'm not only wasting time here, but you've even interrupted my action. Your plan of action is wrong. Lin Shi said bluntly, in fact, confirming His Majesty's current state is the most important thing. You cannot believe the claustrophobia, and I don't want to believe it either. But if it's true, it will be a disaster for you and any of His Majesty's enemies. Disaster? Wang Xingxiao's eyes were cold and gloomy. Disaster. Lin Shi said calmly, he can kill anyone anywhere, at any time, in any way, and no one will notice it. No one can guard against it. He can take away your life like taking away a feather. The invincible realm, the peak of the invincible realm, and the so-called chosen one have no power to fight back, because you don't know anything at all. The moment he makes a move, you're already dead. What is this? Ghost? God? Wang Xingxiao felt more and more ridiculous. If he had this strength, he would have conquered the world long ago. He doesn't now. Lin Shi shook his head. But there are signs. Because of your so-called claustrophobia? Wang Xingxiao didn't know what tone he should use to speak. I know you can't understand. Lin Shi glanced at him and said, the manner you see is really vast, but maybe the world will be different in front of him. He suddenly waved his hand and asked, do you remember in Emperor Dong's palace? Wang Xingxiao froze for a moment. The current monitoring system of Emperor Dong's palace can't be hacked, but it doesn't mean that we can't get the detailed information of your battle with His Majesty in Emperor Dong's palace. Lin Shi looked into his eyes. Maybe you forgot, maybe you haven't thought about it, or maybe you don't dare to think about it. But I can remind you. Where were you when His Majesty woke up in Emperor Dong's palace? Where was your battlefield? Wang Xingxiao's face suddenly changed, and his expression became a little ugly. Obviously, he didn't need Lin Shi to remind him. It was a question he didn't want to think about at all. He knew the answer to this question very well. At the moment when Li Tianlan woke up, he was in Li Tianlan's bedroom. Their battlefield was in Emperor Dong's palace. His time in the bedroom was very short. It wasn't a good process. At that time, Li Tianlan just raised his hand and slapped him out of the bedroom. But the problem was, Wang Xingxiao was very sure that there was no door in Li Tianlan's bedroom that could directly lead to the outside. At that time, he was surrounded by the bedroom walls, the outside world was a corridor, and the edge of the corridor was also a wall. But those walls were not damaged. At that time, when Li Tianlan slapped him, his whole body seemed to suddenly become transparent and pass through the wall. When the wall was intact, he appeared on the lawn of Emperor Dong's palace. This matter was completely incomprehensible. Wang Xingxiao didn't even dare to think about what it meant. Do you know what's going on? Wang Xingxiao carefully recalled the feeling at that moment. At that moment, he didn't touch any obstacles, but he was directly slapped out by Li Tianlan. The more he thought about that scene, the more terrified he felt. I'm not sure, and I don't need to tell you. Lin Shi said lightly. The contemplative look in his eyes became more and more obvious. He thought about the original era shrouded in boundless fog. At that time, there was only the space-time corridor. There was no war god realm, no human palace. There were very few records about the original era. Most of the things had become legends. As for the original His Majesty, the extremely limited information now could only prove that he existed. And such an existence was largely confirmed by the Majesty in the space-time corridor. There were almost no detailed and accurate records of that era, which was almost completely submerged in the fog of time. Most of what was left were legends. The relic gradually became conscious, and the memories began to fade. Therefore, the seniority in the space-time corridor was extremely chaotic. Now, everyone knew who the Majesty in the space-time corridor was, but no one could be sure who he was. It wasn't just him. Even the god of war and the human emperor of the great imperial palace hadn't figured out where they came from. Perhaps they couldn't figure it out anymore because they had already forgotten too many things. What they could remember was their return this time. The legends were chaotic. But some things could always be confirmed. For example, the original Majesty. He did exist. As the most important pioneer of the neutral camp, without him, there would be no today's human clan. There was no doubt about that. He opened the neutral camp, so naturally, he was the strongest in the history of the neutral camp. This so-called strongest, at least for today, was the strongest without a doubt. Among the peak combat powers of the neutral camp, the war god and the human emperor together were no match for the Majesty in the space-time corridor. And the Majesty in the space-time corridor had not been able to surpass the original human emperor. As the son of the war god and regarded as the future successor of the war god, Lin Shi was qualified to know a lot of things. He vaguely heard his father mention that the current Majesty in the space-time corridor had surpassed the original human emperor in terms of authority and was not far behind in terms of authority. The reason why he could not reach the height of the original human emperor was because of his perspective. Lin Shi had a hard time understanding this word. But he had always kept it in mind. Because when the original human emperor was still alive, he would often say, "This world is very crowded. It's a little uncomfortable." Perspective, this word was crucial, but it was also too broad. Lin Shi had a hard time understanding what the world was like from the other's perspective. Perspective, or maybe this was the biggest secret of the original Majesty who was the top of the three camps. These core members had speculated about this, but as long as they mentioned it, whether it was right or wrong, they would soon forget it. But now, Lin Shi suddenly found that in Miracle City, when he began to think about this problem again, his memory was exceptionally clear. Perspective. Perspective, he seemed to have thought of something. It was not difficult for the technical level of the war god's realm to figure out the principle, but the difficult part was that there was no way to do it. He wanted to record it down and send it out, but the moment he sent a message to the apostle, the thought in his mind suddenly disappeared inexplicably. Lin Shi was stunned and then smiled bitterly. "I have an idea that may prove my guess." Lin Shi said thoughtfully, "But I need your cooperation." "How?" Wang Xingxiao asked directly. Lin Shi threw Wang Xingxiao a strange-looking pistol and pointed to the central villa in the group of villas ahead. Across the road, the woods, the flower beds, the artificial lake, and the villas. It was a distance of thousands of meters. Lin Shi said, "Aim there and shoot." "Are you sure?" Wang Xingxiao frowned. At such a distance, shooting wouldn't do anything, but the gunshot would undoubtedly alarm many people. In the current situation, this was definitely not a good thing. "Give it a try." Lin Shi said, "His Majesty should have some instinctive reaction. This can also let you see if I'm talking nonsense." Wang Xingxiao thought for a moment. Suddenly, he raised his hand and aimed the gun at the central villa. Almost at the same time, in the living room of the central villa, Li Tianlan put down the teacup in his hand. Changed. Everything in front of him changed in an incredible and indescribable way in a trance. Everything became a complete hole in front of his eyes. The distance was shrinking and shrinking at will. Li Tianlan didn't realize this at all. He just stretched out his hand casually and grabbed forward. Crack! On the road of the manor, Wang Xingxiao watched a palm suddenly appear in front of him. It was silent, without warning, and there was no way to guard against it. The palm suddenly grabbed his pistol when he was about to shoot. A huge force burst out. Wang Xingxiao, who was unprepared, had no time to react. His finger, which was about to pull the trigger, was instantly torn off by the huge force. Blood gushed out. The palm in front of him held his pistol and finger and disappeared directly in front of him. In the living room, Li Tianlan withdrew his palm and looked at the pistol and a broken finger that appeared in his hand. He was a little confused. The little nanny beside him exclaimed and took a few steps back with a pale face. Everyone was stunned and looked at the things in Li Tianlan's hand in astonishment. That moment just now was like magic. Li Tianlan stretched out his hand and grabbed a pistol and a finger dripping with blood without any pause. The living room was quiet. On the road of the manor, Wang Xingxiao, whose face was livid because of the sharp pain, roared in disbelief, "What's going on? Do you believe it now?" Lin Shi narrowed his eyes tightly and looked extremely shocked. "You should be glad that His Majesty just reacted instinctively. If he found the feeling, he could easily take away your brain and your heart. You wouldn't feel anything, and your body wouldn't even have a little wound. He just stretched out his hand, and then you stood here, intact, and then your brain suddenly disappeared completely. Are you telling me a fairy tale?" Wang Xingxiao's face was gloomy and twisted. Lin Shi smiled faintly. "In a sense, this is science. It can even be explained by your current science. But I don't need to explain it to you." Wang Xingxiao stared at Lin Shi silently and didn't speak for a long time. He couldn't figure out why. But he already believed Lin Shi's words. That moment just now was too strange. If Li Tianlan had consciously wanted to kill him, his martial arts would have been almost useless. But now, he was already dead. Bang! In the living room of the villa, Li Tianlan threw the pistol and finger on the tea table. He looked up at the villa in front of him. Everything was normal. The change just now inexplicably disappeared again. It was an indescribable feeling. The moment he stretched out his hand, the extreme fear once again impacted his will. In a short moment, cold sweat appeared on his forehead again. "Tianlan, what's going on?" Dongxing Wudi looked at the finger and the pistol on the tea table, and then looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan shook his head in confusion. After a while, he whispered, "I also want to know." Chapter 1108. Li Tianlan's bewilderment was genuine. His mind became extremely chaotic. The world in front of him seemed to be constantly overlapping. The feeling of oppression in his heart was still clear, and it began to fade with the passage of time. The world was really narrow. It was so narrow that it was almost suffocating. This so-called narrowness was not a relative sense of vastness, but a perception from the perspective. Li Tianlan couldn't use any words to describe what he felt at that moment. That absurd, shocking, ecstatic, and frightening perspective seemed to appear for a moment and then suddenly disappear. If it weren't for the finger, the pistol, and the blood on the coffee table, Li Tianlan would even think that the moment just now was an illusion. Now that he thought about it carefully, he couldn't even clearly describe what he felt at that moment. In that less than half a second, or less than a second, the world overlapped. To be exact, it could not be said to be overlapping. But Li Tianlan couldn't use other words to describe that scene at all. His eyes saw a lot of three-dimensional images. Every picture was the world in front of him, this villa, this manor. But it was more than what he saw. He couldn't describe it. He saw more than what his eyes could see. Just now, Qin Weibai was sitting next to him, and Dongqing Wudi was in front of him. At the moment when the world overlapped, he saw Dongqing Wudi facing him. At the same time, he also saw Dongqing Wudi's back and sides. Everything, a huge amount of information, and endless details. The whole world seemed to be presented in the most complete form in front of Li Tianlan. He could see every position of every person in every different direction in the room, and he could even clearly see their internal organs, bones, and blood vessels. This was not X-ray vision, it was a kind of. All the pictures were mixed together and appeared completely in front of Li Tianlan. The skin of the people around him was not damaged in any way, and Li Tianlan did not have the so-called X-ray vision function. In that perspective, they still existed, but all the organs in their bodies existed with their bodies at the same time. Countless pictures were completely juxtaposed together. It was not just people. The sofa, the wall, the TV, at that moment, what appeared in front of Li Tianlan was not only the TV screen, but also the back of the TV behind the TV screen. The parts inside the TV and the TV screen existed at the same time. What he saw was not only the wall in front of him, but also the manor outside the wall. Everything that came into contact with his eyes was displayed in the most three-dimensional way. It was completely different from X-ray vision. It was the most intuitive change of perspective. The entire manor became a three-dimensional image, and the images connected the countless three-dimensional images together, finally forming a magnificent and extremely strange image. In this picture, Li Tianlan saw the pistol aimed at the main villa. It was far away, but close at the same time. They seemed to be two figures, but they were extremely blurry. Li Tianlan couldn't see their faces, but in Li Tianlan's eyes, their images were also three-dimensional. The two of them were like two standard three-dimensional images. Their bodies, their organs, their brains, their hearts, their blood vessels, all of them. They were neatly juxtaposed in the picture. It was the first time that Li Tianlan had seen this kind of picture. The picture in his sight turned into a massive amount of information that impacted his will. He was a little stunned. His instinctive reaction was to casually reach out his hand. Then he sat on the sofa of the villa and took the pistol and the finger from an unknown distance. This feeling was indescribable. Because in the image he saw, the other party's fingers were indeed holding the gun. But among the countless juxtaposed and showing thousands of details, there was a three-dimensional image in which the finger and the pistol existed separately. That was to say, the finger and the pistol were separate images, and they were not connected to other fingers. This was just a very subtle detail. Li Tianlan also instinctively took advantage of this detail. So he reached out, took the gun, and took the finger down by the way. He took it. He took it easily. He didn't feel that he was breaking the finger. The finger and the pistol were like separate objects placed separately in that picture. He just took it. After he calmed down a little, the blurred picture became clear in his memory again. Li Tianlan was in a trance. Because when he saw the two blurred figures, he saw not only the pistol and the finger. Beside the two of them, their hearts, brains, and all their vital parts appeared in different three-dimensional images. That feeling was exactly the same as the feeling when he saw the pistol and the finger. In other words, Li Tianlan was 100% sure that if he didn't take the pistol but the heart, he would directly take the other party's heart out of the other party's body. Take things out of his pocket. The other party would lose the heart, but there wouldn't even be any wound left on the body. Li Tianlan shuddered a little. What this meant was self-evident. It meant that if he could have that kind of vision for a long time, in that bizarre vision, he could take anything at will. It was to take. For example, a skyscraper towering into the sky. When all the details appeared in front of him, he could easily find the weakest point. Just take away a steel bar, and the whole building would collapse in an instant. Another example, killing. Killing? There was no such concept. Within his field of vision, even if it was thousands of miles away, through the video, through the screen, as long as he could see, everything about the other party would appear in front of him. Politicians, rich people, and even the so-called chosen one, as long as he could see, he could directly take away the other party's brain or heart without even using any force. Such a perspective, such an ability, he was like a real god. His brain began to twitch slightly, and the feeling of depression continued. Li Tianlan's face was a little ugly, and he subconsciously rubbed his forehead. The amount of information he had received in that instant was too much for him to bear. If a normal person had suddenly received that information, they might have completely broken down. What made him most uncomfortable was the sense of contrast. The magical perspective just now only lasted for less than a second. But when the perspective turned back, everything he saw became extremely depressed. It was like suddenly seeing the real world, even if it was only for a second. But when he returned to the illusion again, everything was a little uncomfortable. But now his perspective was the perspective of a normal person. What was the perspective of a normal person? That was to look at anyone, any object, could only see the side that was facing his line of sight. With a normal perspective, it was impossible to see the back of an object through the side in front of you, let alone a real three-dimensional view. When Dongxing Wudi was facing him in front of him, he could only see the front of the other party, but he could not see the back of Dongxing Wudi in any case. But in that second, Dongxing Wudi in his sight was absolutely three-dimensional, absolutely comprehensive, with thousands of details displayed in front of Li Tianlan at the same time. Li Tianlan rubbed his forehead hard and even closed his eyes. A sword energy was suddenly released from his side. The sword energy turned into a ring and quickly rushed out of the villa, covering the entire manor in the blink of an eye. The place where the two figures existed in his memory was already empty. Li Tianlan subconsciously wanted to chase, but after moving his body, he suddenly realized what he had overlooked. Distance. He actually ignored the distance. With his speed, this distance might not be far, but it was not no distance at all. When he subconsciously wanted to chase after her, he didn't consider this point at all. This was also the sense of confusion caused by the change of perspective. He looked at the pistol and fingers on the coffee table and was silent for a long time. The feeling of being like a god just now did not disappear, but became more and more clear. Li Tianlan could be sure again that it was not his illusion. In that perspective, the so-called distance existed, but it also didn't exist. In that perspective, Li Tianlan was sitting in Yuzhou. If someone was in Star State, in Europe, in Tiannan, or even in the polar region, as long as someone appeared in the video, then no matter how far away they were, Li Tianlan only needed to reach out and take away the other party's brain or heart at will. If this was not enough to make him a god, what if Li Tianlan suddenly had power far beyond what he had now? When his vision was infinitely far away and the whole planet was in his field of vision, could he easily destroy a planet? This question could not be verified at all for the time being. But in such a perspective, there was no need for verification to kill. In this indescribable perspective, the distance was real. And at the same time as the distance was real, was the direction. In the countless pictures composed of countless three-dimensional images, the so-called direction was no longer just the front, back, left, and right. There were countless, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, and even more directions. These directions did not exist in the perspective of a normal person. But in that perspective, it was extremely clear. At the same distance, a certain direction might make the distance between 2 points infinitely far, like the end of the world. But in another direction, the originally infinitely far distance would be instantly shortened, and it would be close at hand. So Li Tianlan suddenly began to think. When countless directions were completely juxtaposed in front of him, the so-called distance was the distance between 2 points. The countless distances between countless points could be very far or very close. Then, how big was the so-called world, the place where they were living now? Chapter 1109. Dongxing Wudi had a lot to say, but he didn't say anything in the end. After the incredible scene in the living room, everyone could see that Li Tianlan was in a bad state. No one knew how bad it was, but the extremely severe headache and depression almost broke Li Tianlan's will. Li Tianlan didn't have dinner. He went directly to the room that the Bai family had already prepared for him and fell asleep almost as soon as he lay down. He was dizzy and in a trance. Li Tianlan had a dream all night. There were all kinds of bizarre pictures in the dream. His perception of his own position was sparse and difficult to refute. He didn't know where he was in the dream. All he could see was holy light and battleships all over the sky. It was like a mythical world shrouded in technology, or a supermodern world shrouded in myths. The content of the dream had no continuity. It was almost a constantly rotating picture without any connection, but it appeared in the dream as a matter of course. Perhaps influenced by the conversation of Xianyuan Wushang not long ago, a huge cross even appeared in his dream. The fairy tales that he had heard from his grandfather when he was a child also began to appear. The list of deification, the journey to the west, Sun Wukong, Hou-Yi shooting the sun, and so on. His thoughts were completely free in the dream. The pictures flickered without beginning or end. When he opened his eyes, there was already a hazy light outside the window. A pair of soft and delicate hands gently scratched his scalp. Her movements were gentle, and a delicate fragrance floated. A pair of dreamy and bright eyes appeared in Li Tianlan's sight. From the dream to reality, this pair of bright eyes seemed to be a clear bridge. In a moment of trance, Li Tianlan seemed to see the sky full of stars. "You're awake." Seeing him open his eyes, Qin Weibai smiled slightly. Li Tianlan grunted in a low voice, and the messy dream quickly faded away. Li Tianlan rubbed his forehead and took a deep breath. His head was still a little uncomfortable, but Li Tianlan could completely ignore this degree of discomfort. Although the depression in his heart still existed, as the night passed, the pictures he saw before began to become blurred. When the perspective returned to normal, he seemed to become normal. "What time is it?" Li Tianlan asked, playing with Qin Weibai's hair. "It's nearly 10 o'clock. Qin Weibai shook her head. Her hair brushed past Li Tianlan's face, tickling him. "You slept for nearly 14 hours. I'm tired." Li Tianlan laughed at himself and said, "I had a dream all night, and it was all messy." The scene in the dream gradually became blurry and almost completely disappeared. Li Tianlan seemed to think of something and laughed. "I dreamed that Sun Wukong and Buddha had a falling out and fighting. They were even driving a plane to fight against each other. In the dream, I actually felt that it was normal." Qin Weibai also smiled, but her smile was a little unnatural. Dream, she had been dreaming recently. But it was different from Li Tianlan's absurd dream. Her dreams were filled with an extreme regularity and normality. The absurdity and abnormality of the dream were actually the most normal. Qin Weibai's normality was the biggest abnormality. Every time she entered her dream, she would appear in an incomparably vast starry sky. Galaxies and star clusters would constantly appear, and large numbers of stars would explode and fall. Her dream had become a TV series that was related to but not very closely related to the real world, and it would always continue. Qin Weibai was also continuing, looking for her garden, looking for the black giant tree, and looking for the almost transparent figure under the giant tree. In her dream, she had incredible power. That was a dream. The power to make it real. No matter what she needed, with a flash of thought, everything in her imagination could become a reality in the dream. Spaceships, superluminal warships, superluminal interstellar fleets. Star cluster level scanning radars. Various civilizations all over the starry sky. A lot of things appeared out of thin air in her imagination, and even she didn't know what to call them. In just a few days, in the continuous dream every night, Qin Weibai had already owned countless supraluminal interstellar fleets that could travel across the starry sky. If all the numbers were added up, Qin Weibai had calculated that the number had exceeded 6 trillion. Not 6 trillion warships, but 6 trillion fleets. Each fleet had the ability to search a galaxy. But under the vast starry sky in the dream, she wanted to find what she was looking for, but it was still like looking for a needle in a haystack. Qin Weibai didn't tell Li Tianlan about all this. She didn't know why. Every time she wanted to say it, there would be an indescribable fear in her heart. The moment she opened her mouth, the fear would directly occupy her consciousness, freeze her soul, and make her fall into an unprecedented state of despair. Dream. This was originally a very normal thing, but now it had become the most sensitive thing for Qin Weibai. Not feeling well? Li Tianlan glanced at Qin Weibai and touched her forehead. No. Qin Weibai blinked and reached out to pinch Li Tianlan's nose. If you hadn't tortured me last night, I wouldn't have slept so soundly. Li Tianlan sat up with a smile. Are you hungry? Dad and the others went to the meeting. I told Mom to prepare lunch now. Ah, she said she would make soup for you last night, but she was still busy in the middle of the night. It should be ready to drink now. Qin Weibai took the pajamas and put them on for Li Tianlan. Her action of helping Li Tianlan put on his clothes was natural. The tone of her voice was also natural. Dad. Mom, Li Tianlan's body was a little stiff. He suddenly didn't know what to say. The parents that Qin Weibai mentioned could only be Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian. It couldn't be anyone else. This feeling was indescribable. What's wrong? Don't you like me calling them that? Qin Weibai tied the gown for Li Tianlan and asked carefully. No, Li Tianlan's voice was a little complicated. They are very happy. Qin Weibai took Li Tianlan's hand and stood up. Whether as a daughter-in-law or a goddaughter, I can call them Mom and Dad. If you don't like it, then I'll be their goddaughter. If you like it, I'll be your daughter-in-law. She looked at Li Tianlan with bright eyes. Do you like it? Li Tianlan was silent for a long time, then smiled and said, Did the minister go to the meeting? Yes. Taking a deep look at him, Qin Weibai nodded. She seemed to suddenly think of something and continued, By the way, when Dad left, he didn't look good. Council meeting? Li Tianlan frowned. Plenary meeting. Qin Weibai said softly. Li Tianlan paused and didn't speak. At this level, there were some rules about what kind of meeting it was. The council meeting referred to a small-scale meeting among the 9 council members. Although this kind of meeting was extremely formal, there would basically be no resolution on some particularly sensitive matters. On some sensitive issues, the council meeting seemed more like a discussion and test, which was a precursor. And the plenary meeting referred to the plenary meeting of the council. Not only the 9 council members participated in the meeting, but also all the councillors of Jianghu State. Any sensitive issues in Jianghu State, such as policies, personnel, or something else, were decided at the plenary meeting. When Dongqing Wudi called Li Tianlan yesterday, they had just finished the council meeting. Now, only one night had passed, and the plenary meeting came. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, and his eyes were a little grim. In recent days, the theme of the meeting almost all revolved around the death of Chen Fangqing and the stability and development of the cabinet. To be clear, the theme of the meeting these days was that the Academy, the Prince Group, the Southeast Group, and even the Special Warfare Group, which was too busy to take care of itself, were putting pressure on Li Tianlan and Dongqing Wudi. The North Group continued to remain silent. If everything went well, the North Group would be a part of the new group in the future. But obviously, the impact of Chen Fangqing's death was gradually fermenting, and some people inside the North Group had begun to have some doubts and scruples. Under such circumstances, could it be that this plenary meeting was about to form some sort of resolution? What do you think? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. He would not regard Qin Weibai as a vase who could only warm his bed and please him in bed. No one in the world dared to think so. Although the goddess who stayed with him had completely restrained all her sharpness, no one dared to underestimate her wisdom. Not to mention anything else, she was now the patriarch of the Lin clan, which was enough to explain everything. It's difficult. Qin Weibai had obviously been thinking about this problem. We are very passive now. The only thing we can do is to compromise and make concessions. It's not good for anyone to fight head-on. And if we really fight head-on, we have no chance of winning, no chance at all. Qin Weibai shook her head gently. In the current situation, it's already a victory if we don't lose too many things. I can make concessions, but they are too insatiable. Li Tianlan said expressionlessly. There's no way. Qin Weibai said directly, we can only wait. It's best to do nothing now. Wait? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. Wait for a variable. Qin Weibai said softly. She looked at Li Tianlan and continued, I've done something secretly, and now I'm almost ready. It was originally a good card, but at the critical moment, we have no choice but to play it first, but it's not the time yet. It's better to hide this card first. If there's a right opportunity, this card can play a great role. What card? Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai curiously. It's about the Special Warfare Group, as well as some people and things of other groups. Qin Weibai smiled. It's very sensitive. It's not the right time yet. I need an opportunity. As for now, what we need to do the most is to withstand the pressure and compromise appropriately. They seem to be chasing us relentlessly, but no one really wants to kill us. The current situation seems very bad, but in the end, there's a high chance that we'll still end up with a draw. It's just that how this game of chess is going to end up testing the wisdom of the major groups. The coordinates are Hengshui City, Hebei Province. The temperature these days is more than -80 degrees Celsius. It's such a cold day, and there's a long line of elders to do a nucleic acid test. The open-air line. Do it twice. Chapter 11:10. When the girl in the setting sun put down the brush in her hand and stared at her handwriting in the afterglow, she had a poetic beauty and tenderness. The girl was beautiful, and so was her handwriting. The faint fragrance of ink floated in the study. The girl's eyelashes trembled gently, and she looked serious and focused in the afterglow of the setting sun. What did you write today, miss? The bald, tall, and fierce-looking man asked with a smile when he saw the girl stop writing. Anything. The girl inadvertently reached out and touched her rose petal-like lips. She said with a smile, it doesn't matter what I write when I practice calligraphy. The important thing is to calm down. Uncle Yeu, come and see what I wrote. The fierce man scratched his bald head and looked a little simple and honest when he smiled. I just haven't graduated from junior high school. Whatever you write is good. As he spoke, he walked over slowly and lowered his head to admire the girl's handwriting. The girl also lowered her head to look at her work. On the white xian paper, there were names, positions, profiles, and some deeds written in delicate handwriting. The orange-red light of the setting sun shone on the first line of the fine and delicate characters, and it was so clear that it was somewhat shocking. Sun Liya, male, former member of the Parliament of Zhongzhou State, Deputy Prime Minister of Zhongzhou State, leader of the Prince Group, 76 years old, served as Deputy Governor of Talent Province, Deputy Speaker of Yungue Province, Governor of Dongshan Province, Speaker, and so on. During his tenure as Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, he fought for the interests of the Special Warfare Group many times, intentionally or unintentionally, such as Sun Lu, Deputy Speaker of Dongshan Province, Deputy Governor of Beijiang Province, Number 6 of Phoenix Pavilion, codenamed Snow Shadow, appeared beside Sun Liya 20 years ago, 37 years old now, and constantly influenced Sun Liya's decisions, such as a certain year, month, and day. Now living in building number 7 of Dragon Lake Park in Yuzhou. Number 17 of Phoenix Pavilion, codenamed White Fox, appeared beside Sun Liya 12 years ago, 26 years old now, and cooperated well with Snow Shadow. Now living in building number 7 of Dragon Lake Park in Yuzhou. He Pingan, male, 52 years old, was the governor of Dongshan Province, served as minister of the Ministry of Personnel of Nanyun, deputy speaker of Southwest City, one after another familiar name, one after another incomparably illustrious figure, and one after another young woman that almost no one knew about. Behind each name was a long list of deeds, and even provided a lot of specific evidence. All the behind-the-scenes transactions were clearly presented on the paper. There were so many of them that it was shocking. In the dense handwriting on the first page of Xian paper in front of the girl, only 2 people were introduced. The girl pondered for many days and secretly investigated for several years. In the end, she only wrote down 7 names. Other than Sun Liya and He Pingan, the former mayor of North City, the current deputy speaker of Yuzhou Province, the current governor of Nanyue Province, and the current secretary-general of the cabinet. The last one was the secretary of Nanyun Province's Governor Qin Shi, Mao Song. Among the 7 of them, Mao Song's position was the lowest, but the current stage was the most sensitive. If all the 7 materials were published, it would be like a nuclear bomb to the entire Zhongzhou state. Its power was enough to destroy the world and even blow up the entire Kunlun city. Naturally, the Phoenix Pavilion, which had been secretly developing for many years, had more power than this. But there was no need to announce the other powers. The weight of these few people was enough. The existence of the Phoenix Pavilion was not a secret to the 7 people on the list. To the others who were similarly immersed in the gentleness woven by the elites of the Phoenix Pavilion, this was no secret. Following the fall of these 7 people, the others would definitely be in a state of panic. This was the most powerful threat, and also a long knife across their necks. After the 7 people were taken down in an instant, Emperor Dong's palace could continue to use this long knife to make use of those who had not been exposed. Dongshan, Nanyue, North City, the cabinet, the 7 names involved the Prince Group, the North Group, the Academics, and the Southeast Group, which was enough to show how terrifying the tentacles of the Phoenix Pavilion extended. And these places happened to be the key places that Emperor Dong's palace would attack next. The girl was not worried at all that no one would believe these things. These people and these things, the authenticity was almost unquestionable. There was a lot of evidence, and a little investigation could find a lot of problems. When this material was published, it would be sent to the council members as soon as possible. Then, the entire Zhongzhou state should be able to hear to that kind of earth-shattering explosion sound. The pressure on Emperor Dong's palace would be greatly relieved. Even if there were still people who would not let go of Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan's graduation would no longer be their main target. Judging from the current terrible situation of Emperor Dong's palace, this was indeed a good card that could pull Emperor Dong's palace out of danger. But the girl always felt a little pity. She originally planned to use this powerful trump card to make a perfect cooperation with His Majesty Li Tianlan. She lowered her head and continued to stare at the words on the paper. Beside the girl, the expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm from Kunlun City was also reading these words seriously. His loyalty to Kunlun City had always been extremely fanatical. But looking at the shocking information on the paper, which was enough to doom Kunlun City eternally, he did not have the slightest change in his expression. All the real handwriting became different when it was projected to his eyes. He just felt that there were a lot of handwriting on the paper, and it seemed that what he saw was not comprehensive. But he did not think much and just smiled. There is no wind or rain, and it looks a little familiar. Uncle Ye, you must know about Mistress Sue's calm disturbance. You are laughing at me again. The girl smiled gently. Her real age was less than 13 years old, but she had an indescribable charm. Yi Yu laughed and then said meaningfully, Miss, this poem is not well written. His Highness may not like it. In this situation, His Highness can't wait for the storm outside. The bigger the storm, the better. The girl named Gu Xinyan's smile faded a little. After thinking for 2 seconds, she asked softly, Still can't get in touch with the teacher? Can't get in touch with him. Yi Yu shook his head helplessly. I haven't heard from him for several days. I don't know where His Highness is. Gu Xianyan nodded thoughtfully and looked at the handwriting on the desk in front of her again. Sister Qin was now ready to play her card, but she had never really done it. She said she would wait for an opportunity. Would this opportunity be the time for Gu Xingyan to appear? After all, it would be such a pity if Gu Xingyan, the protagonist of this drama, was missing. Chapter 11:11. When Dongxing Wudi and Bai Zhanfang came back, it was nearly 10:00 in the evening. Not to mention their gloomy faces, the meeting time was enough to make everyone in the Bai family who really knew the current situation serious. It was another nearly 14-hour meeting. The longer and longer meeting time also showed that Dongxing Wudi was now under great pressure. Except for them, no one knew how fierce the debate was at today's plenary meeting. There was silence in the smoky study. Zhou Mulan, Dongxing Wudi, Bai Zhanfang, and Bai Qingzhao were all smoking in silence. Bai Qingxian peeled an apple and handed it to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took it subconsciously, shook his head, and put it on the table. Qin Weibai was making tea. 2 screens hung on the other side of the study. The screens were on, and the figures of Zhou Yuanshan and Wu Jingmin were equally serious and dignified in front of the screens. These people were almost the core team of the giant group and the new group. It was not convenient for Wu Jingmin to come now. Zhou Yuanshan was far away in Jianghu and could not come, but he participated in the discussion through the internet. These people were the most intuitive present and future of the giant group and the new group. After next year's election, Zhou Mulan and Bai Zhanfang would retire, and Dongxing Wudi would continue to be re-elected. At the same time, Bai Qingxian and Bai Qingzhao would enter the Zhongzhou State Parliament, and Wu Jingmin would serve as a director of Zhongzhou State. Zhou Yuanshan, who was 39 years old this year, would officially establish his position as the leader of the new group in this election. In Li Tianlan and Dongxing Wudi's vision, they intended to push Zhou Yuanshan directly into the parliament. Considering his age, it was almost impossible for Zhou Yuanshan to become a member of parliament, but he could pass the time as a substitute member. At the same time, he could stabilize Nanyue. 5 years later, he could enter the parliament and even further become a director. This was the biggest disadvantage of the new group now. It was not that there were no people available, but there were no suitable candidates for some high-level positions, which involved qualifications and prestige. Wu Jingmin was the only candidate who could make everyone speechless. Bai Qingxian also had the qualifications to become a member of parliament. A little lower, there were provincial speakers and governors. Although the people of the new group lacked qualifications, there was no lack of recommendations. As a result, Nanyue was a little difficult. Unless the new group gave up Nanyue, it was necessary to introduce a candidate who could barely enter the parliament. Zhou Yuanshan was the only choice. Although Zhou Yuanshan was too young and barely qualified, his future and ability were reassuring. Coupled with Li Tianlan's strength, it was not impossible for the new group to push him up. However, with Chen Fangqing's death, the variables in everything increased greatly. Not to mention Zhou Yuanshan's position, even Bai Qingxian's position was being coveted. I'll take a step back. In the long, deathly silence, Wu Jingmin suddenly smiled and said in a calm voice. For a moment, no one spoke. Qin Weibai paused in making tea. After a few seconds, she looked up and asked, "Is the situation so serious?" "I'm afraid it's more serious than you think." Dongxing Wudi took a deep drag on his cigarette and sighed softly. "What did you discuss in today's meeting?" Li Tianlan asked suddenly. Dongxing Wudi flicked the banquet and couldn't help sneering. Obviously, he was extremely dissatisfied with the content of today's meeting. Human affairs. For 14 hours, they talked about human affairs and united against us. Some people talked about several key positions, even Jingmin's position. Do they really think we're at the end of the road? We're not at the end of the road. Wu Jingmin smiled and said, but it's good to compromise appropriately. I'll step down and Speaker Bai will take over. This is the best solution at present. He looked at Dongxing Wudi and then at Bai Qingxian. His eyes were very deep. Everyone could understand what Wu Jingmin meant. Wu Jingmin was already very old. If he continued to serve for another term, when Zhou Mulan and Bai Zhanfang stepped down, he would be the oldest in the Zhongzhou State Parliament, whether it was a member or a director. It was the helpless move of the new group for him to go further. After one term, he had to step down anyway. At present, several major groups were targeting the new group. Wu Jingmin's stepping down at this time was undoubtedly a super heavyweight bargaining chip and a huge compromise for the new group. Now, no matter how bad the situation of the new group was, no one really wanted to push Li Tianlan. As long as Wu Jingmin stepped down, the matter would almost come to an end. With Wu Jingmin's withdrawal, it also meant that the position of the Deputy Prime Minister of the Cabinet, which was quite important among the directors of Jianghu State, was vacant. Other groups targeted Wu Jingmin not because they really wanted this position. A director's position was the key, especially when this position also represented the Deputy Prime Minister of Jianghu State, which was high and powerful. Because everyone wanted this position, but no one was willing to fight for it. If they fought for it, it meant that they would be the first to become chaotic. After all, they were targeting the new group, and they themselves were not monolithic. No one was willing to fight for such a sensitive position. Therefore, even if Wu Jingmin stepped down, the position of the Deputy Prime Minister was very likely to fall into the hands of the new group. With Bai Qingxian, she could skip the counselor position and directly become the new director of Jianghu State. And what the major groups were targeting Wu Jingmin at this time actually wanted was the original position of counselor that belonged to Bai Qingxian, which ranked third in the cabinet. After the new group lost this position, the plan to attack the cabinet had almost failed, but there was still a chance for a comeback. Nanyue, Jiangzhou, Dongshan, Jiangnan, and Xia. With 5 provinces in hand, if it operated properly, the new group would still be the top group in Jianghu State, and it could also establish its right to speak in the cabinet to a certain extent. And if it gave up its strong position in the cabinet, the new group could fully help the giant group fight for some other positions while stabilizing its position, which was also the key of the key. The two groups had always had high expectations for this election, and it could be said that they were determined to win several key positions. The battle for the cabinet was one of the focuses. Nanyue was also the focus. In addition, there was a position in the military that everyone was paying attention to but no one had mentioned yet. After the election, even if Dongqing Wudi was re-elected, he would inevitably step down from the position of the commander of the Border Control Corps. This position originally belonged to Di Jiang of the Wang family of Beihai, but after his resignation, Dongqing Wudi held the position for more than 2 years. The giant group undoubtedly wanted to take back this traditional sphere of influence that belonged to them. What did the commander of the Border Control Corps mean? It was possible. It could be said that he was a super heavyweight in the military, a member of Jianghu State, a deputy minister of the army headquarters, a director of the military, and a marshal of hundreds of thousands of troops. It was no exaggeration to say that the final ownership of this position had the most direct relationship with whether Dongqing Wudi's influence on the military was strong or not. If there were no changes within the Wang family of Beihai, the most powerful candidate for this position was the deputy minister of the army headquarters, Yi Dongxing, who was known as the god of army of Jianghu State. If he came forward, the giant group could only give up no matter how unwilling they were. Today, in the whole of Jianghu State, no one was more suitable to go to the Border Control Corps than Yi Dongxing. If Beihai pushed him forward, then the others had nothing to say. But now Yi Dongxing was fighting for the position of director, and it was impossible for him to go to the Border Control Corps. In this way, the giant group had hoped to fight for it again. The new group still didn't know who the giant group was going to push to fight for that position. Even Li Tianlan didn't know. They only knew that in Dongqing Wudi's mind, this person was almost a candidate who would definitely succeed if he was pushed forward. This also meant that in everyone's mind, that person was the most suitable person to go to the Border Control Corps besides Yi Dongxing. Li Tianlan had seen the list of generals of the giant group and never felt that anyone had such strong competitiveness. And this position was also closely related to the advance and retreat of the new group. Wu Jingmin couldn't work for too long. Obviously, he thought that it was a good result to use his retirement as a bargaining chip to calm the storm, and at the same time to fight for more favorable conditions for himself and to let the new group plan the layout again. And such an outcome meant that the suppression of the new group by the major groups had been effective, and the plan of the new group had been severely thwarted. At the same time, he also gained something. The new group could also fight for other interests if it stabilized itself. In Wu Jingmin's view, the situation caused by him taking a step back was a draw in the future. No matter how unwilling he was, such a situation was relatively the best. It's not that simple. Zhou Mulan, who was a man of few words, suddenly said. What does the council think of me? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Now everything could be said to be caused by him. Although he didn't do anything, he couldn't come up with evidence to prove his innocence. All the pressure on the new group and the giant group was also because of him. The council's view of him was the key. Dongqing Wudi glanced at him and suddenly smiled. The council still recognizes your ability and future. Wendian proposed to lock you up again for a long time, and Wenjiang voted for it. But it was rejected by the president. It was expected that Guo Wendian wanted to lock him up to stabilize the position of the prince group. And Ji Wenjiang, the tycoon of the southeast group, voted for it. Beihai, Wang Xingxiao, now really felt that his wings had hardened. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and didn't speak. Everyone knew that it was impossible to lock Li Tianlan up again at this time. Since the other party mentioned it, there was no doubt that he wanted to take more things from the new group. Li Tianlan thought in silence. He knew very well that he had to do something again now. The president proposed to make you a special security advisor of Zhongzhou State, on the same level as Gu Xingyun and a director. What do you think? Dongqing Wudi suddenly asked. Chapter 11-12. Special Security Advisor of Zhongzhou State. In the history of Zhongzhou State, this was not a strange position, but it was also a position that most people had never heard of. The title of the war god of Zhongzhou State was just what the outside world, or to be exact, the dark world called Gu Xingyun. Kunlun City was the hub of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State, but that was not its name to the outside world. The hub of the special warfare system that Zhongzhou State would not disclose to the public but was recorded was officially called the Special Operations Department of Zhongzhou State. As for Gu Xingyun, he was the 12th Minister of the Special Operations Department of Zhongzhou State and also served as the Special Security Advisor of Zhongzhou State. Those who knew about this kind of part-time job would naturally understand. Moreover, the dark world was originally in a state of darkness. As long as it was not exposed, it naturally did not matter what the outside world called it. However, Li Huaqing's suggestion was to separate Gu Xingyun's two duties. That was to say, in the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State in the future, Gu Xingyun would be the Minister of Special Operations Department, and Li Tianlan would serve as the Security Advisor of Special Operations Department. There was no such thing as who was the boss and who was the second. There was a complete balance of power. Li Tianlan also had an official identity, as well as the treatment and corresponding power equal to that of a council giant in Zhongzhou State. To some extent, such a proposal could be regarded as Li Huaqing's appeasement to the new group. When they were suppressing the new group, they naturally did not think of really driving Li Tianlan into a corner and making Wu Jingmin step down. They took away the position of counselor by Qin Xian and some other important positions and let Li Tianlan enter the decision-making level of the council. This was undoubtedly a kind of balance. It was no exaggeration to say that under normal circumstances, Li Tianlan's treatment could be regarded as a meteoric rise. This kind of advancement wasn't completely unreasonable. After all, Li Tianlan had served as the commander of the Snowdance Corps in the Chaos of Snow Country, which was also a commander-level position, equivalent to that of a member of parliament. Although this position had been removed by the parliament, this experience was also a qualification. Now he had become the Special Security Advisor of Zhongzhou State, and his treatment and status had been further improved. With this qualification and Li Tianlan's own combat capability, others could not say anything. But in this situation, how could Li Tianlan be on the same level as Gu Xingyun? I disagree. Li Tianlan expressed his opinion directly and frankly. His eyes were cold. No one was surprised. Li Tianlan's objection was completely reasonable. Those who could enter this study were very observant about the balance and compromise in all aspects. The moment they heard Dongqing Wudi convey Li Huaqing's proposal, they understood something. Making Li Tianlan the special security advisor of Jianghu State was tantamount to giving him the power of a council member of Jianghu State. It was indeed a huge promotion, which could be said to be a good thing. But Li Huaqing's focus was not on this at all. The point of his proposal was to put Li Tianlan on the same level as Gu Xingyun. The level of the special warfare system of Jianghu State was a very serious matter. Of course, many aspects would be considered. Li Tianlan's combat capability was stronger than Gu Xingyun's, but it did not mean that he had to lead Gu Xingyun. Li Huaqing proposed that they should be at the same level. Li Tianlan did not agree with Gu Xingyun's combat capability. It was the situation of Gu Xingyun, or the Special Warfare Group. The investigation of the treason case of the Special Warfare Group did not stop even in the case of Chen Fangqing's sudden death. Dongxing Wudi served as the patriarch of the task force, while Yi Dongsheng and Qingye, the current minister of the Ministry of Security of Jianghu State, were the deputy team leaders. This was a task force jointly established by the Giant Group, the Southeast Group, and the New Group. Perhaps the Southeast Group would do its best to suppress the New Group, but it did not mean that they would not cooperate in other ways. Especially in the face of the Special Warfare Group, the Southeast Group would not be soft-hearted at all. This was a huge handle that could shake the foundation of the entire Special Warfare Group. As long as they seized this handle and continued to investigate, when they suppressed the development of the New Group, it meant that they could get more benefits from the Special Warfare Group. Everyone in the Southeast Group understood this very well. Therefore, the task force investigated day and night, and the inside story had snowballed. The directors of the 4 provincial special operations bureaus of Yuzhou, Northern City, Suzhou, and Nanyuan were now all under investigation. One of them could be said to be Gu Xingyun's most trusted confidant. Everyone knew what this meant. Gu Xingyun was caught in the storm, and his ally, the Prince Group, who was most likely to give him firepower support, was now in a terrible situation. In the face of more and more evidence, the Special Warfare Group was doomed to fall apart. Even if Gu Xingyun could barely escape with his own combat capability, the Special Warfare Group could not continue to exist. That was what everyone thought. Until Li Huaqing proposed that Li Tianlan and Gu Xingyun should be at the same level. This suggestion really had some hidden meaning. There was no doubt that letting Li Tianlan become the special security advisor of Jianghu State was indeed a comfort to the new group, but the more important meaning behind this proposal was to protect Gu Xingyun. Li Tianlan and Gu Xingyun should be at the same level. This was undoubtedly a hint that the treason case of the Special Warfare Group should come to an end here. As Li Tianlan entered the parliament, the Special Warfare system was bound to undergo a big reshuffle. The elites of the Li family were in contact with the Special Warfare system of Jianghu State again after more than 20 years. Gu Xingyun was bound to be cautious and did not dare to make any mistakes. In this way, even if he had really done something outrageous, he did not dare to continue to do it now, especially when he was no match for Li Tianlan. He could only behave himself. After all, Gu Xingyun was also an expert who was close to the peak of the invincible realm. Perhaps after realizing the extreme strength and presumptuousness of his personal strength, Li Huaqing's suspicion of Li Tianlan did not disappear, so he thought of using Gu Xingyun to check and balance Li Tianlan. This was not a good choice, but it was the only choice. Of course, there were better ways, such as transferring Wang Xingxiao to take over Gu Xingyun's position. But in this way, not to mention the backlash within the Special Warfare Group, the Southeast Group and the New Group were not fools. Who would be fooled by such an obvious provocation? Such a proposal could not be passed at all. In order to protect Gu Xingyun, the Prince Group, which also needed an ally, would definitely support it. The North Group, which already had doubts, would only choose to be neutral. The Southeast Group was also happy to see Gu Xingyun involve Li Tianlan's angle, but it would not make a clear statement. In this way, the probability of passing was very high. Once this proposal was passed, it meant that Chen Fangqing's death and the case of treason of the Special Warfare Group were completely over. The rest were just some trivial aftermath. The Special Warfare Group would naturally reunite with the Prince Group when it regained its footing. Chen Fangqing had been in the cabinet for many years. His death was originally a touch of sadness. Coupled with his deep-rooted management, the Prince Group had been able to stabilize the situation with the strong support of the Special Warfare Group. Now that the new group had lost the initiative, it was no longer advisable to cut a piece of meat off the Prince Group. Similarly, their plan to conquer the cabinet would also be completely ruined and doomed to failure. But the new group did not gain nothing. Li Tianlan entering the parliament and becoming an invisible director could also be regarded as the expansion of the new group's sphere of influence. This was also the result that Li Huaqing wanted. He hoped that the new group could rise and make its voice heard in different fields, but he absolutely did not want it to be too tough in one field, such as the cabinet. The new group had no choice but to accept such an outcome. This is unacceptable. The Prince Group, which has stabilized its position, has an ally, and it is not difficult to stabilize the interior. Li Huaqing is also willing to let the Prince Group have one more director to cooperate with Guo Wendian. The decline of their influence is inevitable, but the appointment of the new director is certain after Li Huaqing's promise. This was already a great harvest. Such a situation was also Guo Wendian's dream. And Bai Qingxian entered the cabinet and replaced Wu Jingmin. The position of counselor left by her was the goal of the Southeast Group. The Prince Group wanted the position of the new director, the Giant Group wanted to protect the new group, and the new group wanted to stabilize itself. No one would compete with the Southeast Group. Li Huaqing was also ready to unite most of the forces to promote Hua Xingyang as the prime minister. So the Southeast Group would get the position of the counselor as it wished. And the academics also achieved their set goals. Li Huaqing was re-elected, and Hua Xingyang was the prime minister. In the next 5 years, the academics would be completely strong. It was already a great harvest for the Special Warfare Group to be able to stabilize its position. Naturally, it would not ask for too much. And the deal between the North Group and the new group would not let each other down. In this way, the situation between the six would be completely obvious. The new group, the Special Warfare Group, and the Prince Group were all losers, but they also gained something. The Giant Group and the North Group did not lose or win, but they also got what they needed. As the victors, the academics and the Southeast Group had their gains, but at the same time, they had to pay. The most important thing was that after this, the entire Zhongzhou state would become stable. Stability was always the overriding factor. Victory and failure, balance and compromise, every move of the major groups was between advance and retreat. No one left dismally. After reaching a situation that everyone could accept, the stability would continue. They never tried to destroy any strong group, but they could freely advance and retreat. This was the key to Li Huaqing's success today, and it was also the style of the academics. Now it seemed that it was undoubtedly very clever. Countless thoughts were running in Li Tianlan's mind, and he suddenly said, "What's the result?" "No result." Zhou Mulan suddenly smiled. "The pressure is great, but I can still stand it for the time being," but he shook his head and did not continue. Li Tianlan already understood what he meant. If there was no hope of a comeback, then this result was the best result. Li Huaqing protected Gu Xingyun. Although they were somewhat unwilling, they could only accept it for the time being. After all, it was not a bad thing for them that Li Tianlan entered the parliament. Moreover, the difference in combat strength between Li Tianlan and Gu Xingyun was extremely obvious. But in the environment of the special warfare system, Li Tianlan's strength would not be shaken at all because of his shallow foundation. The initiative was already on Li Tianlan's side. Li Tianlan was also very clear why there was no result at this plenary meeting. The only explanation was that although Dongqing Wudi and the others resisted the pressure to express their opposition, such opposition would obviously not be too firm. This also meant that they had the possibility of agreeing, but the details still needed to be discussed. Otherwise, today was a plenary meeting, and Li Huaqing could use a vote to force his proposal. It did not come to this step, naturally, because of Dongqing Wudi's attitude, so there was a possibility of compromise. Li Tianlan lowered his head slightly and narrowed his eyes. Perhaps now in the heart of the leader of the giant group, he was already thinking about how to make himself more powerful in the special warfare system. Chapter 11-13. Let's wait a little longer. Li Tianlan was silent for about 4 or 5 minutes before he leaned back on the sofa and said softly. Dongqing Wudi nodded and said, Li Huaqing didn't force his proposal through at the plenary meeting today because Dongqing Wudi and others didn't refuse firmly. This left room for further discussion. Similarly, no matter how firm the opposition was, it was still an opposition. This also left time for discussion with Li Tianlan. The next result could be discussed later. There was less than a year before the election. Time was tight, but there was still some spare time. You have to make up your own mind about this matter. Think it over. Dongqing Wudi lit another cigarette and said with a smile, the president has time to wait. He didn't continue. Li Tianlan nodded silently. The current situation was undoubtedly extremely unfavorable for the new group. Everyone was under great pressure. Li Huaqing wanted to calm down the storm and gave a relatively acceptable result. The Xian group could consider or even refuse, but the longer this decision was delayed, the more variables there would be, and the more losses there would be. After all, while the Xian group was considering, the other groups would not just sit still and do nothing. When it was time to suppress the Xian group, they would definitely go all out. This time was almost regarded as the last time the Xian group could suck the Xian group's blood before they compromised. Li Tianlan picked up the teacup, took a sip of tea, and looked at Wu Jingmin on the screen. As if noticing his gaze, Wu Jingmin nodded with a smile. This old man who had truly sacrificed everything for the Li family had long felt exhausted. Now that he had retired, he had nothing to be unwilling about. Even he himself thought that this was the best result. Li Tianlan slowly leaned back on the sofa and stopped talking, as if he was meditating. Dongqing Wudi began to talk about several sensitive positions in the military. Li Tianlan didn't speak, just quietly listening to their conversation. The moment he closed his eyes, his perspective had begun to shift in another direction. The Qin family was filled with a mournful atmosphere. Qin Fangqing and Qin Shi died on the same day, so their funerals were naturally on the same day. Although it had been less than a week since their funerals, the Qin family had obviously become deserted. Even most of the Qin family's relatives had left Yuzhou. If Li Tianlan really accepted Li Huaqing's proposal, there was no doubt that after the major groups reached a new balance, the Qin family's experience would soon be completely forgotten. As Qin Shi's secretary, Mao Song still hadn't left the Qin family's compound. Qin Fangqing's death had earned the whole Qin family a lot of sympathy. While the hard-pressed prince group suppressed the new group, it also hoped to unite the Qin family for more support. Qin Fangqing did make a series of inappropriate decisions before his death, but his contribution to Zhongzhou state couldn't be erased. Not only in the prince group, but even the senior officials of other groups respected Qin Fangqing very much. At this time, uniting the Qin family would undoubtedly put more pressure on the new group. People close to the Qin family would be further promoted. It was said that Qin Fangqing's secretary, Yuan Lin, would soon serve as the governor of a province. The Ministry of Personnel also talked to Mao Song. It was said that he would soon be appointed as the Secretary General of a province. The Qin family was not very prosperous. Except for Qin Fangqing and Qin Shi, most of the others were developing in the economic field and state-owned enterprises. These people would also be taken care of to varying degrees. But as the storm of Qin Fangqing and Qin Shi's death subsided, the Qin family's biggest reliance in the future was undoubtedly the two secretaries, Yuan Lin, who was the governor, and Mao Song, who was the deputy governor. So the Qin family was now trying to win over these two secretaries. No matter what Mao Song and Yuan Lin thought now, they couldn't really leave the Qin family alone. So the two of them had been living in the small courtyard arranged for them by the Qin family during this time, dealing with Qin Fangqing and Qin Shi's funeral. At the same time, they were also waiting for the new appointment notice. Mao Song's performance had always been normal. The so-called normal was not panic, not excitement, and had always maintained a rigorous and serious attitude to deal with all kinds of affairs and deal with all kinds of people. After dinner, Mao Song shut himself in the study. This used to be Qin Shi's study, but now it was Mao Song's office. It could be seen that the Qin family valued and wanted to win him over. He was now studying several documents about Nanyun province. There were many rumors about his and Yuan Lin's promotion in the outside world. It seemed to have been settled, but in fact, there were also disputes. As Qin Fengqing's secretary, Yuan Lin's rank was the governor. His position was also the most controversial. Many of the higher-ups were inclined to let Yuan Lin be the governor of a province in the northwest. Under normal circumstances, Yuan Lin could be said to have such an outcome. Everyone knew the current situation of the prince group. If Qin Fengqing stepped down under the pressure, there was basically no hope for the governor of Yuan Lin. Most likely, he would be given an idle position to retire, which was a relatively good outcome. But now, Qin Fengqing's abnormal death became a ladder for Yuan Lin's promotion. Coming out of Qin Fengqing's influence, he was still a capable person of the prince group. Naturally, the prince group wanted to take this opportunity to push him to a more prominent position. Therefore, the prince group was now inclined to transfer Yuan Lin to be the speaker of the province in the northwest. The speaker of a province and the governor seemed to have the same rank, but in the eyes of the higher-ups, they had completely different weights. Yuan Lin himself was the governor, and his seniority was enough. Even if Yuan Lin could not be the speaker of a province, the position of the governor of a remote province was not something the prince group could be satisfied with. Therefore, if it was determined that he could not win the position of the speaker of a province, Yuan Lin would naturally be appointed to a more important position at the level of the governor. In Jianghu state, it was not easy to find a position more valuable than that of the governor but not the speaker. Several heavyweight departments in Jianghu state had always been contested by militarists, so it was hard for the prince group to arrange for them. As for departments like the Ministry of Personnel, they were all members of parliament. Yuan Lin was not qualified. Therefore, the prince group was now focusing on fighting for two positions. The first was the mayor of Yuzhou. The second was the mayor of Huading. The current speaker of Huading was one of the leaders of the prince group, so it was unlikely that Yuan Lin would go there. In Yuzhou, with Bai Zhanfang's retirement next year, there was bound to be a reshuffle in the Yuzhou parliament. Yuan Lin undoubtedly had a great chance. This was also the result that the Chens wanted to see. If Yuan Lin became the mayor of Yuzhou, it would be easier for him to take care of the Chens. This was also what Mao Song wanted to see. Because Yuan Lin could not win the position of the speaker of a province, the higher-ups would inevitably make compensation in other aspects. Qin Fengqing's secretary was demoted, and Qin Shi's secretary was promoted. This was a matter of course. In such a situation, Mao Song's new position might not be the secretary-general of a province, but the director of Nanyun province, the deputy governor. With Qin Shi's death, Mao Song could be regarded as having a meteoric rise. This result was basically a foregone conclusion. Because Mao Song had received some promises about Yuan Lin and his appointment. Some forces that no one had expected would do something, and finally achieve the current result. Therefore, Mao Song was now very concerned about some documents in Nanyun. It could even be said that he had entered the state of deputy governor in advance. When there was a knock on the door, it was nearly 12 o'clock in the middle of the night. It was quiet inside the Chen's compound, and everyone had fallen asleep. Listening to the rhythmic knock on the door, Mao Song showed a faint playful smile at the corner of his mouth, and said lightly, "Come in." The door was gently pushed open, and a young woman with a slim figure wearing a black coat with her hair in a bun came in. The young woman was about 25 or 26 years old. If it wasn't for her unique charm, no one would even be able to tell that she was married. She was extremely beautiful, but she had a kind of unapproachable temperament. Furthermore, she was not reserved, so she appeared extremely arrogant and undisciplined. She looked very cold. She placed the document in her hand in front of Mao Song. Her cold temperament suddenly disappeared when she opened her mouth. Her voice also became somewhat soft. "Brother Mao, this is the document you wanted." Mao Song opened the folder casually. The folder was empty. Mao Song smiled softly. The young woman's name was Qin Yao, and she could be considered as Qin Fengqing's granddaughter. Although she was not the direct granddaughter, they were very close. Qin Yao's biological grandfather was Qin Fengqing's biological elder brother. With such a relationship, Qin Yao was naturally one of the core members of the Qin family. Mao Song had seen Qin Yao a few times before, and his impression of her was that of a very proud and reserved little woman. He heard that she got married at the beginning of last year and was extremely strong at home. He himself was also a senior executive of a large company, so he did have the right to be proud. Can this document satisfy me? Mao Song knocked on the empty folder with a pen, and his voice was low. Qin Yao gently bit her pink lips. Under the light, her red lips glowed with an extremely soft luster, and looked incomparably sexy. It's all done according to your request. With a little embarrassment and shame, as well as a touch of charm and welcome, Qin Yao said in a low voice. Mao Song pulled Qin Yao into his arms. There was a touch of struggle and hesitation in Qin Yao's eyes, and then it turned into helplessness, looking delicate and pitiful. Mao Song unhurriedly took off Qin Yao's coat. His breathing began to gradually quicken. Under the coat was a piece of snow-white smooth silver high heels, black stockings. Other than that, there was nothing else. Not bad. Mao Song smiled very comfortably. Qin Yao, who was trembling all over, lowered her head, and became more and more embarrassed. Kneel down, I'll give you a facial mask. Mao Song smiled and pressed Qin Shishua down. Her fair and tender shoulders slowly pressed her into the desk with incomparable toughness. A few seconds later, a pair of small trembling hands moved slightly along his legs. Mao Song continued to look at the document. 2 minutes later, that familiar and exciting feeling of comfort took over his brain. Mao Song leaned on the chair and smiled faintly. The Qin family is really a talent, or is it that the more cold and aloof a woman is, the more coquettish she is? When I saw you before, I really didn't expect that there would be a day like this. Mao Song really didn't expect it. On the second night after Qin Fengqing and Qin Shi's funeral, Qin Yao appeared in Mao Song's room. Although her performance was very embarrassing and shameful, she didn't hide what she did. It was seduction. This was undoubtedly to find a new backer after Qin Fengqing and Qin Shi's death. He didn't know what Qin Shi's inner thoughts were. Maybe she felt guilty or something else, but under that extreme stimulation, he almost didn't hesitate to accept Qin Yao, who was extremely strong at home but was extremely obedient by his side. The gentle movements under the desk paused. Qin Yao seemed to raise her head. Her voice became softer and softer, but still had a sense of reservation. That voice was low, but in Mao Song's ears, it was like thunder. I just saw Aunt Murong enter Secretary Yuan's room, wearing makeup and sexy clothes. At this time, Aunt Murong, Yuan Lin, very sexy. Mao Song's mind was dizzy. Astonishment, anger, jealousy, all kinds of emotions suddenly surged up. He directly pulled Qin Yao up. He gritted his teeth and said, "Which Aunt Murong?" Qin Yao's red lips became softer and softer. She whispered, "There's only one Aunt Murong, Murong Shou." Mao Song didn't speak for a long time. Of course, he knew that there was only one Aunt Murong. She had always been his sister-in-law in his heart. A beautiful, reserved, mature, dignified, gentle, virtuous, and elegant woman. It wasn't that Mao Song didn't have any other thoughts, but he didn't dare to have any other thoughts. Because that was Qin Shi's wife. And now, Qin Shi's wife, wearing sexy clothes, was in Yuan Lin's room? What was she doing? What was she doing? Qin Shi's bones were not cold yet. Slap. Mao Song slapped Qin Yao's but fiercely. He gritted his teeth and said, "You bunch of bitches." Amidst Qin Yao's low exclamation, Mao Song directly picked her up and threw her on the bed in the lounge. Her hysterical venting didn't cause any waves in the Qin family's courtyard. It wasn't until nearly 3:00 in the middle of the night that Qin Yao put on her coat again and sneaked out. Mao Song laid on the bed, thinking about random things in the lounge full of ambiguous smell. He thought about Qin Yao for a while, then thought about Murong Shou. He thought about her appearance in Yuan Lin's room at this time. He thought about her usual dignified and gentle appearance. He thought about Xianxia again. Sometimes he gritted his teeth, sometimes he sighed softly. He gradually fell asleep in a daze. In the dark lounge, a shadow that had witnessed everything slowly moved and finally came to Mao Song's bed. The shadow was vague, as if it didn't exist, but from a distance, a gaze was always watching here. Mao Song turned over in bed uneasily. His brows gradually wrinkled, and his breathing began to become rapid. In the chaotic dream, Chen Yao became Murong Xiu. The woman he once dreamed of seemed to have lost all elegance and reserve, leaving only rich and intoxicating gentleness and charm. She obediently knelt in front of his door. Bang! In the dream, the sound of the door breaking sounded. She stood outside the door with a twisted expression, staring at him. She covered in blood from head to toe. She rushed over directly and firmly choked his neck. No! Mao Song suddenly woke up from the dream with a scream. His body curled into a ball, and he kept muttering to himself, "I didn't kill you, I didn't kill you. Governor, let me go. I didn't kill you." The gaze that had been cast on Mao Song was withdrawn. The vague shadow in the lounge rushed out of the Qin family's courtyard in an instant and turned into a black windbreaker. The windbreaker was completely unfolded. A meteor suddenly crossed the sky over the Qin family's courtyard. The next second, the windbreaker appeared inside the Bai family's manor and automatically hung on the hanger. In the bedroom, Li Tianlan gently hugged Qin Weibai, played with her hair, and smiled slightly. The breakthrough was found. And it was an unimaginably good breakthrough. Chapter 11-14. Except for a few people involved and Li Tianlan, no one else knew the absurd scenes that happened in the Qin family's courtyard. The rich amount of information made all kinds of ideas spin rapidly in Li Tianlan's mind. Chen Yao, Murong Xiu. Mao Song, Yuan Lin. This was undoubtedly the best breakthrough and the variable that the whole Emperor Dong's palace had been dreaming of. It was not difficult to control Mao Song now. What surprised Li Tianlan the most was Murong Xiu. He had seen this distinguished madam of the Qin family on the first day of Qin Fangqing's death. She was less than 40 years old, mature and bright. She was indeed a rare beauty. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have imagined that this lady, who looked extremely dignified and reserved, could be more open than Chen Yao and Mao Song. If he had not heard it from her, he would not have thought that Chen Shi, who looked tall and strong, was not manly at all. It was easy to understand why Murong Xiu seduced Yuan Lin. Under normal circumstances, the identity of Madame Chen could indeed make her rich for the rest of her life. But this so-called normal circumstances had an important premise: the Chen family could continue to exist. This was obviously impossible. Li Tianlan was not so generous. Everyone knew this. Being Yuan Lin's mistress did not sound good, but as long as she left the Qin family, at least she could continue to live. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. His heart was still surging with joy. He had decided to take advantage of this opportunity. It was Mao Song who killed Chen Shi. There was no doubt about this. Mao Song's behavior in his dream was enough to explain the problem. The clue given by Xianyuan Wushang also pointed to Mao Song. Li Tianlan did not know how Xianyuan Wushang found Mao Song, but he had an almost instinctive trust in Xianyuan Wushang. As soon as Xianyuan Wushang gave the news, Li Tianlan directly sent out Ruthless, who had just inexplicably recovered some energy. Ruthless' sword intent was connected with his sword energy. Under the situation that they shared the same vision, Li Tianlan, who had been watching the Qin family's courtyard for a day, finally saw the explosive content he wanted to see. Chen Shi's death was confirmed. And the cause of Qin Fangqing's death was still inexplicable. But it was not important. What was important was that Yuan Lin was Qin Fangqing's secretary, and this secretary had slept with Qin Fangqing's daughter-in-law. As for the others, there was no need to mention them. This news alone was enough to completely reverse the current situation of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan instinctively wanted to get up and communicate with Dongqing Wudi about what he had learned. He knew himself very well. In terms of individual combat capability, no one in the whole dark world was his match now. And he could make some decisions from a very high position. But in any case, he could only be regarded as a newcomer in the high level of Zhongzhou state. It was inevitable that there would be things that he didn't consider thoroughly. At this time, he needed to rely on the wisdom of some old people to make himself mature in this aspect quickly. However, at this time, after a moment of hesitation, Li Tianlan lay back down. He didn't tell Dongqing Wudi about Mao Song before, because he couldn't explain the source of the information. He didn't know this himself. Monitoring Mao Song was his trust in Shenyuan Wushang. Now that he had made a major discovery, there was no need to explain the source of the information. A faintly discernible sword intent slowly bloomed from Li Tianlan's fingertips, matching with Heartless. Lien. Heartless, hanging on the hanger, disappeared in the Bai family's manor. The next second, the black trench coat kept splitting into shadows in the Qin family's courtyard, almost covering the entire courtyard in an instant. From now on, everyone in the Qin family was in Li Tianlan's sight. And the only thing he needed to do was to wait for an opportunity. An opportunity for Qin Yao and Murong Xiu to climb into Mao Song's and Yuan Lin's beds respectively. Li Tianlan's body relaxed slightly, and his arm around Qin Weibai slightly tightened. Qin Weibai, who was sleeping soundly in his arms, obediently turned over with the slight strength and buried her face in his arms. A delicate fragrance floated. Li Tianlan closed his eyes, relaxed his spirit, and gradually became in a trance. Late nights in the village were far more lively than at night. Within a few days of coming to the village, Li Guangtu had to change his schedule. He slept during the day and went out at night. Otherwise, he could hardly rest at night. On one side of the village, Gu Xingyun's aura had become more and more obvious. The aura had been increasing from beginning to end. In just a few days, it had entered the real threshold of the peak of the invincible realm, and it was still growing. Now it was close to the peak of the invincible realm. That was the level before he, Wang Tianzong, Lin Fengting, and others broke through. According to Jiang Shangyu, when Gu Xingyun reached that level, everything should stop. Whether he could break through from the invincible realm to the level they were at now depended on himself in a short time. Li Guangtu's purpose here was very simple. At Jiang Shangyu's invitation, he came here to protect Gu Xingyun. This is only the surface of things. Jiang Shangyu's real purpose might be to show sincerity, or it might also be a deterrent. He saw a lot of things in this base, especially the villagers here. Their extraordinary physical fitness meant too many possibilities. Protect? It was almost impossible for Gu Xingyun to encounter any variables here. In fact, the strength of these people in the village was what Jiang Shangyu wanted to show Li Guangtu the most. Li Guangtu didn't want to admit it, but he had to admit that in a few days, he had gradually lost some of his detached mentality. He had never looked down on Jiang Shangyu. The phrase, "the younger generation will surpass the older," was used to the extreme by Jiang Shangyu. But it didn't mean that Li Guangtu really thought that Jiang Shangyu could be on an equal footing with him. The Jiang family was alone. Even with more aid and Knights Templars, they still had no advantage in front of the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Therefore, Li Guangtu had always thought that the cooperation between them was dominated by the purgatory of Heaven Capital. This was a very normal thing to do. But after seeing this village and these villagers, his idea was almost completely subverted. Jiang Shangyu's position in his heart suddenly rose a lot. Li Guangtu finally realized the strength of this alliance, and he knew that he had to give Jiang Shangyu enough respect when necessary. Jiang Shangyu had been sitting on the grass outside the village. He rarely entered the village, and he didn't even eat much. Li Guangtu only saw him occasionally eating a piece of grass pulled from the ground. He just sat there quietly, as if he was thinking about something. The village was lively and noisy in the middle of the night. Almost all the villagers went out of their homes. There was no light in the village. In the pitch-black darkness, everyone was enthusiastically exchanging some trivial matters with each other. Li Kuangtu walked out of the village and turned to look at the villagers again. The layout of the village was narrow, and it was especially dark at night. Standing a little further away, even with his eyesight, he couldn't see the villagers clearly. But these villagers didn't seem to be affected at all. Every time he saw this, Li Kuangtu always felt a little uncomfortable. He couldn't tell what was going on, but in this village, which was lively at night but cold and silent during the day, he always felt uneasy and anxious for no reason. Taking a deep look at the villagers, Li Kuangtu shook his head and found Jiang Shangyu in a familiar place. Jiang Shangyu ate the grass in his hand bit by bit, thinking silently. "What are you thinking about?" Li Kuangtu sat down beside him. "I don't know." Jiang Shangyu's voice was calm and rational. "You don't know?" Li Kuangtu smiled. "I'm telling the truth." Jiang Shangyu looked at him seriously and said, "I always feel that I've overlooked something very important, but I don't know what I've overlooked. It's like I should have been prepared for something, but I suddenly ignored it because I was busy with other things." Li Kuangtu looked at him and didn't make any comment. He just said slowly, "Gu Xingyun's breakthrough is very smooth. We should be able to go back after dawn. In this place, the longer we stay here, the greater the risk of exposure. If we go back earlier, we may be able to catch up with the good show in Yuzhou." "Yes." Jiang Shangyu's eyes became a little dazed again, and it was obvious that he was lost in thought again. He instinctively echoed Li Kuangtu, the good show in Yuzhou should come to a critical moment. Li Kuangtu narrowed his eyes slightly and was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly asked, "You said that you sent someone to test the two newcomers who appeared next to Li Tianlan? What happened?" Silence. A second later, Jiang Shangyu suddenly jumped up from where he was. He stared at Li Kuangtu, and his eyes kept changing. Li Kuangtu was shocked, but he remained calm on the surface. He just looked at Jiang Shangyu quietly and asked, "There was an accident in the result of the test?" Jiang Shangyu looked at Li Kuangtu in silence. He was silent for a long time, and then laughed hoarsely, "I don't know." "What do you mean?" Li Kuangtu frowned. Jiang Shangyu's smile was a little gloomy, a little enlightened, and a little helpless. He looked at Li Kuangtu and said seriously, "Your Highness, if I tell you that I forgot about it, would you believe it?" In fact, it didn't matter whether Li Kuangtu believed it or not. What mattered was that it was true. If Li Kuangtu hadn't reminded him, he didn't even know how long he would have been thinking. There were some things that he didn't ignore. He completely forgot about it. He had completely forgotten that he had sent someone to probe Xianyuan Wushang. If no one had reminded him, he might not have remembered it at all. From a certain point of view, it was also a kind of deception. This was undoubtedly an extremely abnormal thing. Jiang Shangyu took out his mobile phone and began to dial. When he dialed, he murmured softly, "I'm afraid things are going to be troublesome." Chapter 11:15. Forgetting something was something that everyone would experience in normal life. However, it was something that he was very concerned about, but he forgot it. This was undoubtedly very abnormal. Jiang Shangyu was different from everyone else. Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian were unknown. Their appearance beside Li Tianlan seemed very abrupt. People would pay attention to them, but they would not pay too much attention to them. After Jiang Shangyu used all his connections to investigate Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian to no avail, and consulted Li Kuangtu several times to confirm that the Li family could not have these two people, he immediately realized that the sudden appearance of these two people might bring some changes. Probing their origins. This was the first thing Jiang Shangyu did, and it could be said that it was the thing he paid the most attention to. But he forgot. The result of the test was already obvious. If there was no problem with the origin of the two people, Jiang Shangyu could not forget such an important thing. This kind of natural neglect was so careless that it was as if he had deleted a very insignificant thing from his memory. Fraud. And it was a fraud with extremely high authority. If Li Kuangtu had not asked, perhaps Jiang Shangyu would not have remembered that he had tested Xianyuan Wushang until Xianyuan Wushang showed some authority in front of him. This consequence, Jiang Shanyu felt a little cold in his heart, and he also had some doubts. The other party's means of making him forget this matter was too obvious. There were only two obvious possibilities. One was to start from his spiritual world. If so, Jiang Shanyu would not feel that he had neglected anything at all, so this possibility could be ruled out. As for the other one, it was fraud. Just fraud? If he guessed correctly, Xinyuan Wushang and Xing Tian should be Li Tianlan's guides. With the importance they attached to Li Tianlan, how could one of the two guides be a fraud? Jiang Shanyu could not understand. It seemed that no matter who came, it was more suitable than a person on the path of fraud. His existence also seemed to affect the cooperation between the two guides. If one of them was in the field of fraud, then what was the other one? Jiang Shanyu put the phone to his ear. The phone was quickly connected. The person on the other side of the phone cautiously said a bunch of secret codes, and then hung up the phone. Then an autopsy report and a lot of photos began to appear on Jiang Shanyu's mobile phone. Jiang Shanyu held the mobile phone and looked at the photo carefully. After a while, he smiled at Li Guangtu and said, "Thank you for reminding me, Your Highness. If you hadn't reminded me, I would have forgotten about it. I've just called Yuzhou Province. The result has come out. You can take a look at it together." Li Guangtu walked over quietly and looked at the photos on the phone with Jiang Shanyu. There was a badly mutilated corpse in the photo, which made Li Guangtu frown. For a moment, he couldn't even understand how the other party died. It looked like there was some kind of power that kept expanding inside the body of the deceased, and finally completely destroyed all the internal structure of the deceased. To be precise, it was as if someone had quietly planted a heavy bomb in his body. However, although the deceased in the photo was badly mutilated, there was no trace of explosion. Jiang Shanyu silently slid the screen and flipped through the photos taken from different angles. After a while, he whispered, "My conclusion is basically the same as the autopsy report. Some kind of energy completely stimulated the accelerated growth of all the organs in the deceased's body in a short period of time in an incomprehensible way. The consequence of accelerated growth is not that the organs in the deceased's body age rapidly. That kind of power has been increasing, and in the shortest time, it directly broke through the capacity limit of the organs in the deceased's body. All his organs are like balloons being blown up. The energy is increasing, and the expansion is getting faster and faster. Finally, bang. On Jiang Shanyu. You described vividly, the heart, lungs, liver, stomach, blood vessels, muscles, bones, and even every drop of bone marrow and every cell in the deceased's body completely exploded because they couldn't contain that kind of power, which led to the current result. The autopsy report doesn't seem to be as detailed as you said." Li Guangtu squinted at Jiang Shanyu. He just hurriedly glanced at the autopsy report on the screen. There were a lot of vague words in the report, as well as a description that could not be confirmed. In fact, it was similar to what Jiang Shanyu said. However, if you didn't listen to Jiang Shanyu and only looked at the report, you would get another vague conclusion. In the end, the report did not give any clear results. It only said that the cause of death was temporarily unknown, but it ruled out certain possibilities such as poisoning, disease, and homicide. Jiang Shanyu was silent for a while and slowly said, "I do know more than them, but it's only about the way of death of the deceased itself. I want an explanation." Li Guangtu said lightly. "Your Highness should be very familiar with this kind of energy." Jiang Shanyu laughed and pointed in the direction of Gu Xingyun. "Similar energy is the key to Gu Xingyun's recovery. You should have felt it. In addition, the dragon vein in Li Tianlan also has this kind of energy." "You mean?" Li Guangtu raised his eyebrows. "Vitality." Jiang Shanyu's tone was affirmative and calm. The dragon vein in Li Tianlan is essentially vitality, and the energy in the body of the deceased is also vitality. If we have to compare, the vitality contained in the dragon vein is essentially stronger than the energy in the body of the deceased, but it is too weak. And the vitality in the body of the deceased is far greater than the dragon vein in Li Tianlan's body in total. If this kind of energy is only a little bit, it has unimaginable benefits for the body of the deceased. For example, it can cure all the hidden dangers in his body, so that he will never get sick again in this life, and even won't have a cold. It can let him live for more than 100 years or more. But once this kind of energy exceeds a certain limit, it can also be a sharp weapon for killing. The injuries in the body of the deceased were blown up by this vitality. That trace of vitality is constantly increasing, which is equivalent to planting thousands of miniature bombs in his body. This method is very cruel. Even I can't imagine the pain the deceased suffered before he died. Thousands of miniature bombs exploded in his body. Li Guangtu coughed subconsciously. Jiang Shangyu continued to look down at the screen. After a while, he laughed and murmured, "It turns out to be Saint." Li Guangtu was a little surprised. He doesn't have this kind of means. I'm not talking about the deputy palace master of the invincible realm in Emperor Dong's palace. Jiang Shangyu said softly, although we are both saint, we are talking about two different concepts. Saint is just a code name for Wei Kunlun, and I'm talking about the real saint, the kind that is only one step away from the angel. But saint plus deception, what kind of inexplicable combination was this? The miracle city was a forbidden place for any force, especially for these leaders. They had to be even more cautious, so no matter what kind of combination, a holy disciple was a must. Saint plus a calligrapher was the best combination, and saint plus an apostle was the most violent combination. Even if it was a martial artist, it was more useful than deception. What was the other party thinking? Maybe things are not as bad as I think. Jiang Shangyu shook his head subconsciously and said softly. At least if it was saint plus deception, it was basically impossible for Mao Song to be exposed. This also meant that Li Tianlan would still be in a terrible state. Li Guangtu looked down at the photo in Jiang Shangyu's mobile phone thoughtfully. If it was just a test, why did he die? What do you want to express in such a cruel way? Li Guangtu suddenly asked. It's not his fault. Jiang Shangyu laughed. We can test, and the other party can. We can avoid it. So if I want to get the result I want, I naturally have to force the other party to take action. Otherwise, if we talk for a long time, the result is ambiguous. What is it? I'm the one who arranged for this person to die. Xianyuan Wushang. Xing Tian. Jiang Shangyu repeated these two names and said, everyone has a taboo that can't be violated. You can also say it is the bottom line, whatever it is. In short, it is something that can't be offended. It's too easy to test their origin. An idiom is enough. Helping the wicked? Li Guangtu raised his eyebrows slightly. Helping the wicked. Jiang Shangyu nodded with certainty. Is there any profound meaning to this word? Li Guangtu was a little confused. This word was easy to understand. Maybe it was not commonly used, but basically everyone knew what it meant. There are a lot of things involved. Jiang Shangyu said slowly, for example, fate, mystery, a mess. To put it simply, the meaning of this word is actually very rich. It represents the most humiliating period of history in human history, and it can be said to be the best strategy to sow discord in history, which has caused many consequences. He seemed to think of something, and his eyes were a little playful. That strategy to sow discord could be said to be His Majesty's biggest decision-making mistake, and the consequences caused by it could not be remedied until now. It was also the most glorious victory of the Order camp, and it even directly led to the death of the original His Majesty. This word in the time corridor was completely linked to the fate of the entire human clan, which could be regarded as their bottom line. What do you mean? Li Guangtu narrowed his eyes. Jiang Shangyu was a little absent-minded and whispered, the beginning, the end. He. Ha, ha, ha 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 ha. Jiang Shangyu's laughter suddenly stopped. An incomparably sharp sword intent enveloped his body. He slowly turned around. In his sight, the sword intent on Li Guangtu's body kept gathering, almost tearing the world apart. What do you mean, Your Highness? Jiang Shangyu's smile remained unchanged. I don't understand what you're saying. Li Guangtu said blandly, What is an angel? What is a saint? What is helping a tyrant? What is a strategy to sow discord? What is the so-called beginning and end? Jianghu looked at Li Guangtu silently for a long time. In the distance, Gu Xingyun's aura gradually stabilized. Jianghu suddenly smiled and said, I can't tell you. Really? Li Guangtu's smile was a little cold. But I can also tell you. I'll tell you everything. Jianghu continued, but there is a condition. Say it. Li Guangtu's voice was cold. Jianghu smiled and pointed in the direction of Gu Xingyun, with a sincere expression. Join us, all of this will no longer be a secret to you. I'm in a state of confusion, and there are many things I can say at will. You can even know more than Li Tianlan, but this requires you to really join us. I can bring you not only knowledge, but also power. He looked at Li Guangtu with deep eyes, as if tempted by the devil. Your Highness, don't you really want to go further? If you join us, I can guarantee that you can break through again in a short time and touch the real supreme level. Li Guangtu was silent. The surrounding world was silent. At that moment, all the hair on Li Guangtu's body stood up. The village, which had been bustling just now, became dead quiet in an instant. Li Guangtu could not see through the darkness, but he could clearly feel that the villagers who had been communicating with each other stopped talking at the same time and turned around at the same time. Countless pairs of eyes locked on him at the same time. The eyes were incomparably cold, without any anger. It was like a group of dead people staring at him. Chapter 11:16. The simple and elegant boat floated lazily and leisurely on the surface of the hidden Dragon Sea. Li Huaqing tossed the fishing rod in his hand and casually picked up a tangerine and peeled it. He smiled and said, How was the meeting this morning? Hua Zhengyang smiled and nodded in agreement. The cabinet meeting in the morning seemed to be held quietly, but in fact, it was secretly thrilling enough to suffocate everyone. All the people in Zhongzhou State who got the inside information, that is, all the governor-level officials, were paying attention to the result of this meeting. The contents of last night's plenary meeting had already been spread out through some obscure channels. The core members of the major groups all knew the news. Regarding Li Huaqing's proposal, the situation facing the new group, and the situation of Vice Prime Minister Wu Jingmin, these were all the focus. Hua Zhengyang presided over the cabinet meeting today. In everyone's eyes, there was a sense of aggressiveness. Whether Wu Jingmin would advance or retreat could be seen from the results of this meeting. From a certain perspective, Wu Jingmin's results seemed to indicate the new group's future strategy. Would they compromise or remain in a stalemate? Contrary to everyone's expectations, this highly anticipated meeting went unexpectedly smoothly. After losing the Prime Minister, the cabinet meeting presided over by Second Minister Hua Zhengyang almost became the only one that carried out his will. Wu Jingmin didn't say much from beginning to end. Even when he expressed his opinion, his attitude was that he supported the second minister's decision. Hua Zhengyang was in a good mood for the first time since he had complete control over the cabinet. His expression was a little reserved. We've passed a few controversial proposals, and we've also nominated a few departments, including a minister. It shouldn't be a big problem for the Ministry of Personnel to investigate. That doesn't mean anything. Li Huaqing shook his head. Hua Zhengyang was in charge of the cabinet after Chen Fangqing's death. This was the first time Hua Zhengyang had called a cabinet meeting. No matter what the others thought, they wouldn't openly object. It was reasonable for the cabinet to pass several controversial proposals. As for the nominations from the other departments, they were just nominations. They needed to be discussed and finally decided during the meeting. I know. Hua Zhengyang nodded. He thought about it and said, Deputy Premier Wu is getting on in years. This is not a good thing. Li Huaqing said meaningfully. Hua Zhengyang squinted. Eyes, no words. He naturally knew what Li Huaqing meant. Regardless of his age, Wu Jingmin's style of doing things had always been stable. His criminal methods were also relatively gentle. Most importantly, Wu Jingmin had always followed the rules when it was time to. Even as an opponent, Hua Jingyang could not find any fault with him. Now that Wu Jingmin had retired and the new group was coming in aggressively, Li Tianlan would not let go of the position of director of Jianghu state in any case. With Wu Jingmin's resignation, Li Tianlan would take the opportunity to enter the parliament. At present, it seemed that Bai Qingxian could only replace Wu Jingmin. A woman? No one in Jianghu state dared to think so. Bai Qingxian, who came from the Ministry of Personnel of Jianghu state, had served as the mayor of Luojing of Zhongyuan province, the speaker, the governor of Qinzhou province, and now the speaker of Liaodong province. This female high-ranking official, who was one of the few high-level officials in Jianghu state, gave a strong and almost harsh impression at work. Although her character had eased in recent years, she was more powerful. At the beginning, she was transferred to the place where the academics started for the purpose of cooperation, but such cooperation really made the high-level officials of the academics feel mixed feelings. If Bai Qingxian replaced Wu Jingmin as the second prime minister of Jianghu state, he and Hua Jingyang would become the most direct opponents. Compared with Wu Jingmin, it was really not a good thing to face Bai Qingxian directly. Bai Qingxian in the cabinet would bring more pressure to Hua Jingyang. Li Tianlan entering the parliament would also give Li Huaqing a full sense of oppression. The only thing that satisfied the academics was that after the election, they would occupy the position of number 1 and number 2, and they would also become extremely powerful. Hua Jingyang thought silently for a while, and then said with a smile, "The matter of Liaodong should be settled, right?" This was completely the proper meaning of the question, and also part of the balance. Bai Qingxian could step into the director's seat from Liaodong, and naturally, the academics could smoothly and normally ask for more power to speak in Liaodong. In the past 2 decades, Liaodong had experienced 4 speakers. The first one was Li Huaqing, who now occupied the position of president. The second one was Hua Jingyang, the second prime minister of Jianghu state. The third one would have entered the parliament if there was no accident, but he had to retire because of health reasons, which also interrupted the plan of the academics to perfect their own promotion structure. Therefore, the academics had no choice but to cooperate with the giant group, and Bai Qingxian became the 4th speaker. Now, Bai Qingxian stepped into the director's seat of Jianghu state and became the new speaker of Liaodong. Naturally, he was a capable person of the academics, and also a candidate whom the academics strongly recommended to enter the parliament. In this regard, whether it was the new group or the giant group, they had to agree whether they wanted to or not. It's almost settled. Li Huaqing nodded. Let's discuss it in a few days. After a short silence, Hua Jingyang asked, "Still haven't contacted Gu Xingyan?" "No." Li Huaqing frowned. He had been trying to get in touch with Gu Xingyan recently, but he couldn't find him. He shook his head and said helplessly, "Kunlun City is a bit chaotic, but it's not appropriate to keep it chaotic. It's time to calm things down. I'll protect Gu Xingyan, and Li Tianlan will take the opportunity to enter the special warfare system. For the two of them, it's a lose-lose situation. The president's means are naturally brilliant." Hua Jingyang smiled very happily. "It's just a helpless move." Li Huaqing said blandly, "This matter can be discussed, but Li Tianlan's request is not simple. I can't let him press Gu Xingyan out of breath. If he wants the initiative, I can give it to him appropriately. But I want stability, He must also give it to me. The president is very considerate, but Dong Huang is still young and may not be able to understand your painstaking efforts." Hua Jingyang said with a seemingly unintentional smile. "It doesn't matter." Li Huaqing shook his head. "Dongqing Wudi will understand." The phone suddenly rang. It was a very familiar ringtone. But at this time, it was extremely harsh. Li Huaqing, who had reached out to hold the fishing rod, subconsciously stiffened, and then slowly took out the phone. Dongqing Wudi's name kept flashing on the phone screen. Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and answered the phone. "Wudi, it's me. President, I have an important discovery here. I'm on my way to the Hidden Dragon Sea now." I'll pick you up, and we'll go to see a good show. Dongxing Wudi's voice was quiet, but it seemed to be suppressing a different kind of emotion. Li Huaqing's heart sank for no reason, and he said calmly, "What good show?" "You'll know when you get there." Dongxing Wudi chuckled softly. The laughter was light, but extremely cold. It was like a sneer. "You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.